Welcome back to I Wish Somebody Told Me, the podcast where we have the financial conversations that help you protect your money, build wealth, and create a stronger legacy for the people you love. Today, I want to start with a very simple question. If you passed tomorrow, who would get your 401k? Now, don't answer too quickly because you might be thinking, that's easy, my spouse or my kids. Or maybe I already created a will, everything is going to be spelled out. But here's what I want you to understand. Your will doesn't necessarily determine who receives your 401k, your IRA, your life insurance proceeds. In many cases, the beneficiary designation you filled out years ago controls where that money goes. That's what we're talking about today. Beneficiary designations. It's one of the simplest parts of financial planning, but it's also one of the easiest things to forget. And forgetting about it can create some very unintended consequences. As always, this episode is for general education purposes and isn't individualized legal, tax, or financial advice. So let's get into it. Now let's talk about the form that you probably forgot about. Think about when you started your current job. You probably had a mountain of paperwork, tax forms, health insurance, direct deposit, your 401k, and somewhere in that process, somebody asked you, who do you want to name as your beneficiary? You typed in a name, you click submit, and then you went back to work. That might have been 5 years ago. It might have been 15 years ago. And there's a good chance you haven't looked at that designation since. Now think about how much your life may have changed since then. Maybe you got married. Maybe you got divorced. You had children. You had a second child. Maybe someone you named passed away. Maybe you started a business. Perhaps you've remarried and now you have a blended family. Point is, your life has changed. And perhaps your wealth has changed. But did your beneficiary designation change with it? That's the question. But in plain words, what is a beneficiary designation? Let's make this really simple. A beneficiary is the person, people, a trust, or other eligible entity that you've designated to receive an asset after you pass. Certain financial assets commonly allow you to name beneficiaries directly. That can include things like 401k, your IRA, life insurance policies, annuities, and depending on the account and institution, certain bank and investment accounts can also have payable on death or transfer on death instructions. So when you pass away, those assets may pass according to those beneficiary instructions rather than through your will. That's why this matters. You could spend time creating an estate plan that says, I want my assets divided equally among my 3 children. But if an account has a valid beneficiary designation naming one person, that account may pass directly to that beneficiary regardless of what your will says. Your documents and account registrations need to be coordinated. So here's an example. Let's say years ago you started a job and opened a 401k. At that time, you named a family member as your beneficiary. Years pass. You get married, you have children, you buy a home, your 401k grows. Maybe it's now worth $300,000, maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million. Meanwhile, you've created a will. Maybe you've even established a living trust. You've told your family what you want to happen, but you never went back and reviewed that original beneficiary designation. Now imagine your family discovering after your death that the account doesn't necessarily follow the instructions they thought you had established elsewhere. That's exactly the type of situation proper planning is designated to prevent. And with proper employment retirement plans in particular, there are also federal spousal rights rules that can affect beneficiary choices. So you don't want to rely on a generic assumption. The point is, don't guess. Check your paperwork. Now, while looking at that paperwork, you might see something like primary or contingent beneficiaries. There's another piece people sometimes overlook. When you review your beneficiaries, don't only look at your primary beneficiary. Look at your contingent beneficiary as well. Your primary beneficiary is generally first in line to receive the asset. Your contingent beneficiary is essentially the backup if the primary beneficiary cannot receive it. Let's say your spouse is your primary beneficiary. That's completely intentional. But what happens if both of you pass away in the same accident? Who's next? If you have children, is it your children? Is it your trust? Is it someone else? That's where contingent beneficiary planning becomes important. I've seen people carefully choose their primary beneficiary and leave the contingent beneficiary blank. Again, estate planning is about answering questions before your family has to answer them for you. So when should you review your beneficiaries? How often should you check this? At minimum, make beneficiary reviews part of your regular financial planning process. But there are also certain life events when you should absolutely stop and take another look. For example, marriage. You got married, you got to review everything. Divorce, review everything. Don't assume the divorce itself automatically produces the result you want for every account or policy. Having children or adopting a child, review everything. The death of a beneficiary, same thing. Remarriage, major changes in wealth. The theme here is pretty straightforward. When your life changes, your financial plan should change with it. Now, what about your living trust? Now, this connects directly to our conversation in the previous episode about living trusts. Some people assume I created a trust, so I'm done. Not necessarily. Your living trust is one component of your estate plan. Your beneficiary designations are another. Your will is another. Your insurance is another, and your retirement account's the same thing. They need to work together. For example, depending on your circumstances, your attorney and financial professionals may recommend naming individuals as beneficiaries on certain accounts. In other situations, there may be reasons to name a properly drafted trust. But this isn't something you should blindly change because you watched a 30-second video on social media. Especially with retirement accounts, there can be a significant income tax and distribution consequences depending on who or what you name as a beneficiary. So the goal isn't putting everything in your trust. The goal is make sure everything is coordinated with your overall plan. That's a very different conversation. Your retirement accounts deserve particular attention because they can become some of your largest assets. Think about someone who's been contributing to a 401k for 20 or 30 years. That account could potentially represent hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Yet the instructions controlling where that money goes could trace back to a beneficiary form completed decades earlier. And retirement accounts have their own rules. A surviving spouse may have certain rights. Non-spouse beneficiaries may have different distribution requirements. Trust beneficiaries can introduce another layer of complexity, and tax rules can change over time. So this is an area where your estate planning attorney, your financial advisor, and tax professional may need to coordinate. You're not simply asking who gets the money, you're also asking how will they receive it, when will they receive it, what are the potential tax consequences, and does this decision fit with the rest of my estate plan? Now let's talk about your life insurance. Life insurance is another asset where beneficiary designations are extremely important. Think about why you purchased the policy in the first place. Maybe it was to replace your income, pay off a mortgage, provide for your spouse, fund your children's education, provide liquidity for your estate, support your business, or perhaps simply leave a legacy. Now imagine purchasing that coverage, paying premiums for years, and then failing to update the beneficiary when your circumstances change. The insurance policy may be working perfectly. The problem is that the instructions attached to it no longer reflect your life. That's why insurance reviews and estate planning reviews should not exist in separate universes. They need to connect. And if you're a business owner, there's a whole other layer. Your personal wealth may be connected to your company. Maybe you have a business-owned insurance policy. Maybe there's a buy-sell agreement. Your company provides retirement benefits. Maybe your ownership is part of your estate plan. Perhaps your family depends on the income produced by the business. So you have to ask, what happens to all of this if I'm gone? Who owns the business? Who controls it? Who receives the economic benefit? How does your insurance fit with that transition? Your beneficiary designations are one piece of a much bigger succession planning conversation. Building a company without planning for its eventual transition can leave your family with a valuable asset and no clear roadmap. So I'm going to give you some homework today, and this is something you can actually do. Open your 401k, find the beneficiary section, look at the name, then check your IRA, check your life insurance. If you have multiple old retirement accounts from previous employers, check those too. And for each one, ask, who is my primary beneficiary? Who is my contingent beneficiary? And does this still reflect what I actually want? And then don't immediately start changing things if you have a more complicated estate plan. If you have a trust, a blended family, minor children, significant assets, a business, or other complicated family circumstances, this is where professional advice becomes important. First, identify what you currently have, then make sure the pieces are coordinated. And there's a bigger lesson here. People sometimes think financial planning is only about generating a higher return. What's the best stock? What's the market going to do? Should I buy this investment? Those things get attention because they're exciting. But wealth planning is also about protecting what you've already accumulated. Imagine spending 30 years building $1 million retirement account and never spending 5 minutes checking who is listed to receive it. That's not an investment problem. You have a problem with your planning. And many planning problems are actually preventable. That's why I want you to remember this phrase. You work hard to build it. Make sure you have a plan for where it goes. So before you finish today, check 3 things: your retirement accounts, your IRAs, your life insurance policies, and confirm your primary and contingent beneficiaries. And most importantly, make sure those designations coordinate with your current wishes and your overall estate plan. Because your will, your trust, your retirement accounts, your investments, your insurance, and your business shouldn't be separate pieces of paper telling different stories. They should be parts of one coordinated financial plan. If you're ready to take a closer look at how your investments, retirement accounts, your insurance, and your estate planning strategy work together, schedule a consultation with my firm, Fortitude Financial. You can contact us at fortitudefinancial.co. We'll help you start asking the right questions and coordinate with the appropriate legal and tax professionals when needed. I'm Jason Malone, and you've been listening to I Wish Somebody Told Me. And if today's episode made you pull out your phone and check a beneficiary designation you haven't looked at in 10 to 15 years, then that's exactly why we want to have these conversations. I'll see you on the next episode.